4 years ago, the love of my life drove away and I didn't think I would ever see him again. He left 2 years worth of memories, an engagement ring, and so many broken promises in his wake. And yet I never gave up hope. It didn't matter how many breakup songs I listened to, how many sad letters I wrote but never sent, or how much I begged for the ache in my heart to end so I could let him go. Issac Kellen would always hold a place in my heart. A small part of my fragile, hopeful heart always longed that he would come back. Like my knight in a shining white Toyota, he would roll up and whisk me away into the sunset. But this is real life. I am Alyssa Green and I am all too fragile. I am like a china doll on a shelf, praying that someone careless won't walk by and accidentally knock me off, sending me careening towards the unforgiving wooden floor, shattering my poor, broken heart. Issac was the kind of guy girls dreamed about. Tall, handsome, with a shaggy mop of red hair he never quite knew what to do with. He could play the guitar, draw, and had an insatiable sense of adventure. We had spent every day together until one day he decided I wasn't enough for him. There was something better out there and he had to go chase it. Issac had always been a dreamer with his head in the stars. There were so many nights we would spend sitting in the bed of his truck together, pointing out the constellations and naming made-up ones together. We had our problems, but so does everyone. When he drove away that fateful day, leaving me standing alone and heartbroken in my driveway, I never let go of that small thread of hope. That is, until today. He's engaged to someone else. When I opened my phone this morning and I saw their engagement pictures posted on social media, I physically felt my heart break. I pray, dear reader, that this is a pain you never have to experience. When I saw their picture together, I knew, wholly and finally, that it was over. There was nothing I could do and Issac was gone forever. But what was that small voice in the back of my head? I had always had good intuition, and most of the time I listened to it. Right now, that little voice was screaming at me to go and get him. At the very least, get closure. Sure, it's been 4 years since you've even seen his face. But this is the last chance you'll ever get to say the things you never said. If ever there was a time to do something bold, Alyssa, the time is now. I steeled myself and looked at the clock. Issac lived in a small town with his family about 2 hours north of where I lived. If I left now, I could run to his front door, drop a letter or something in his mailbox, and quickly retreat. That voice was relentless, screaming at me to go. There's so much still you need to say, Alyssa, it said. If you don't say it now, it'll be too late. I jumped to my feet and felt the blood rush to my face. All my life, I had been the passive one. The one to let things pass me by because I felt that if it were meant for me, then it would happen, right? So why did I feel like this was what I needed to do? Say what you need to say, Alyssa, before it's too late. There's no guarantee Issac will even want to talk to you anyway. But it's worth a shot. Either way, you get your relief. Quickly, I found a piece of paper and a pen and I wrote. I had always been an expressive writer. I always felt it was easier to write what I needed to say rather than saying it out loud. I poured my heart into that page. I wrote down everything that I had left unsaid, everything I wanted Issac to know. Even if he didn't read it, even if he hated me afterwards, at least I would have no regrets about it. So I took a deep breath, finally sealed the letter that contained my broken, beating heart, and jumped into my car. Then I drove. I packed up my little blue Jeep and I hightailed it north. It was late fall and the leaves were all kinds of yellows, reds, and browns. It made me think of the first time Issac had brought me to meet his family all those years ago, and we admired the scenery together. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. Fall always made me think of change. New beginnings, old past. Letting go of old things. Getting ready for the new. More tears began to fall and the road in front of me became a misty veil of tears in my eyes. I remembered the exit number. I would always remember the exit number. After 2 hours of driving, I was winding through the back roads of Isac's small hometown again. Have you ever drove somewhere and forgot how you got there? Suddenly you're at your destination with no memory of driving there? I think that was what happened to me. All I could think about was Issac. His face, his blue eyes, his strong arms wrapped around another girl. I cried some more. Why was she enough for him? Why is he the perfect man for her? But he couldn't be that for me. What in the world happened to the ring he bought for me? And then there I was, turning down his street. Alyssa, what are you doing? The voice suddenly said. You're crazy for doing this. Why did the voice change its mind now? I was so close, and my heart was about to beat out of my chest as I approached the last house on the street. There was his truck, parked in the driveway. That meant that he was home. I felt my heartbeat pounding in my ears, and every step felt like I was walking through quicksand as I parked the car, opened the door, and approached the house. My hands were shaking as I stretched the letter out to drop it in the mailbox, when I suddenly saw something move in the window of the house. Someone was opening the front door. My throat went dry like sandpaper and my knees began to buckle. What if Isaac opened that door? What would I say? A small blonde head poked out the door. It was Isaac's sister, Charlene. Her big blue eyes went wide when she saw me. In the time that we were together, Charlene had always felt like a little sister to me, having none of my own. She gasped, Alyssa? What are you doing here? She stepped farther out of the door. Charlene. I stumbled, nearly dropping the letter. I took a shaky step towards her. It's been so long, she started to say. Then she turned her head around, looking back into the house, as if to make sure no one was listening. She motioned for me to come closer. I quickly stuffed the letter into my pocket and stepped onto the front porch of the house. You were always my favorite, she whispered, smiling up at me with a big cheesy grin. Then her face fell as she realized something. Are you here for Isaac? She asked. I nodded. I heard he was getting married, and I felt like I had so much left that I needed to say to him. So I wrote him a letter, and I was going to drop it off for him in the mailbox. You've got to stop him, Charlene said. That caught me off guard. Of all the things I was expecting to come out of this little girl's mouth, that was not one of them. What do you mean, Charlene? I asked. I don't like her, she said. The other girl, Cece. The one he's marrying. Why not? I asked. She's boring, Charlene said. She never likes to have any fun, and she's turned Isaac into a bland saltine cracker. Our parents don't like her either. So what should I do about it? I asked before I realized I was asking a middle schooler for relationship advice. Go talk to him, she said. He's upstairs, doing wedding planning stuff. Charlene stepped aside and pushed me into the house. Go, she said more urgently. Walking back into that house brought back a flood of memories that I was wholly unprepared for. I remembered the first time Isaac had brought me here, when I was so nervous to meet his parents who would one day feel like a second family to me. The couch where we would stay up late talking about our plans for the future. The backyard where I saw my first real snow. The tree we had a picnic under. Every corner of this house was filled with memories. Get it together, Alyssa, you're on a mission. I rounded the corner into the kitchen and started up the stairs, where I heard voices talking in the distance. Isaac. The hallway seemed to stretch out in front of me like a runway, or an aisle. Every step I took felt like it shook the walls around me. The last door on the left was open, letting golden light spill out all over the carpet. I heard two voices coming from that room. When I finally stepped through the doorway, I saw the back of Isaac's head and his dad, standing over him, talking about something. His dad's jaw dropped when he saw me. Hey, Alyssa? He said, as if he believed I was a ghost or a figment of his imagination. Hi, I said nervously. Slowly, Isaac turned around. All those feelings I had been trying to let go of, every suppressed memory and broken promise, seemed insignificant in that moment when I saw him. He was the only thing in the world that I wanted at that moment. Alyssa? What are you doing here? Isaac said. Isaac, I started to say, but the words seemed intangible. They floated away when I tried to grab them as soon as I saw his face. His dad seemed to snap back into reality as he looked back and forth between his son and me. I am going to give you two some space, he said, and awkwardly shuffled out of the room. Isaac, there's so much I have to say. I waited for you, for all this time, and I know you're getting married. I hope you're happy. I really do. But there was so much I had to say before it was too late, I said. Isaac took a step towards me, studying my eyes that were fiercely fighting back tears. Alyssa, I don't know what to say, Isaac said, choking back tears of his own. When you left that day, I started to say. Before I could get out another word, another breath, Isaac took one careful step towards me. Gently, he cupped my cheek in his warm hand and took a breath. He turned his head slightly and kissed me. Everything in the world was insignificant compared to what I was feeling at that moment. Isaac was here, he was real, and he was kissing me. I could feel his soft lips on mine, his breath catching in his throat as he went in for another kiss. It's always been you, I said, pulling my face back slightly from his. Even if you marry her, it's always going to be you. Isaac seemed to decide something at that moment. In the past, I had always felt like I could read his mind or tell what he was thinking. But at that moment, I had no idea what was going through his head. What had she done to him? It's always been you, Alyssa, Isaac said carefully. What do you mean? I asked, confused. You're marrying her? Not because... It's so complicated. I wish I could explain it all easily. I moved on because I didn't think you wanted me back. I moved on because I had to, not because I wanted to, he said. But when you drove away that day, I started to say, I had so much left I had to see. So much was left I had to discover within myself. But it all leads back to you, Alyssa. Every path I have ever been on, I've wished you were there at the end of it. It's been so long. I thought you had moved on as well, he said. I shook my head, almost unable to believe the words that were coming out of his mouth. I waited for you, Isaac. All this time, I have waited for you. Then he kissed me again, more passionately, more desperately than he ever had. Let's get out of here, he said. I'll call off the wedding and we can just get in the car and go wherever you want. How does that sound? We can do whatever you want. Go wherever you want. Just please, stay by my side. I nodded. I was unbelievably, extraordinarily happy. Suddenly I heard a little noise. I turned around and saw Charlene peeking around the doorframe. Charlene, Isaac teased. Is the wedding off? She asked. I nodded and she cheered and ran away to go tell her parents. Isaac pulled me in close and held my head in his hands. Everything is okay now, he said. Alyssa, I am so glad you came back to me. And Alyssa and Isaac grew old together. They bought some land, built a house, and had 2 beautiful children. They spent their days loving each other and living life together, and everything was right in the world. Next story, Christmas came and went, and my Kathy still hadn't come home. I waited and waited, but the house stayed empty. Apart from me, of course. I'm always here. A month before the holidays, Kathy had taken a nasty fall. After a broken wrist in the spring and a heart attack in the summer, I'd been bracing for winter's tragedies. Yet still, it caught me unprepared. Her body might be 81, but in her heart, she's still 22, headstrong and endlessly energetic. Kathy's always been that way, but since illness had gotten the best of me 7 years ago, she'd become less gentle with herself, focused more on distractions than her health. Although my ties to the physical world are fragile and difficult to control, I did my best to protect my wife from that side of herself. Closing the back door she'd left open, brushing tripping hazards aside, putting her heart medication on her bedside table so she wouldn't forget to take it in the morning. But Kathy is chronically scatterbrained and hopelessly unobservant. She enters a room like a tornado, leaving behind safety hazards that didn't exist moments before. I'd stare, aghast, at an iron left face down on a towel, pulling the plug just as it began to smoke. She wouldn't notice the mark until a day later, raising a brow and muttering something along the lines of, well, aren't I silly? Our daughter, Ade, also knew this quirk of her mother's well and would stop by often to check in on her. I'm your mother, Kathy protested as Ade fussed over a palm-sized bruise on her calf, a gardening mishap. Those damned rutabagas. I'm supposed to be taking care of you, not the other way around. Mom, Ade said calmly. You almost died in the summer. Of course, I'm going to... Oh, don't be so dramatic, Kathy sighed, waving her away. A small heart attack. So what? I'm still here, aren't I? Ade sighed. At least think more about what I said. Moving up island might be good for you. I'd buy you any house you want. Besides, she added, looking around the living room with a shiver, this place gives me the creeps. Kathy smiled. Well, it doesn't scare me. On days when Kathy was feeling low, like the crisp November morning when she fell, she would ascend the rickety ladder to the sprawling attic. It was stuffed with furniture and clothes that Kathy and I had collected over 50 years of marriage. But most important to her was the box in the corner overflowing with photo albums. She pulled out an older album, worn faded blue, with a small gift box drawn on the corner. I was sorry she chose that one. It always made her cry. I met Kathy a week before Christmas, 1958. I had gone to the shopping center just before closing to buy my mother a pink robe and slipper set she'd been eyeing, and on my way out a voice stopped me short. Excuse me? I looked over, and there was Kathy, standing at the gift-wrapping kiosk with a little smile on her face. Yes. I can't help but notice you've got something there that does not look like it's for personal use. I looked down at the set, then back at her. You'd be right about that. Christmas gift. For my mother. Well, I don't know you, but most men are awful at gift wrapping. I, however, she said, tapping a roll of wrapping paper next to her, am an expert. I wasn't one to pay for something I could haphazardly put together myself. But there was something about Kathy that made me never want to turn away, even from the start. I shrugged and handed it to her. She grinned, clapping her hands. Color preference? None. Wonderful. She stepped back and looked over all her options. In the end, she chose a gold paper with velvet green ribbons. I watched in fascination as she wrapped it flawlessly. Wow, it looks beautiful, I said as she handed it back to me. My sole talent. You buy any other last-minute Christmas presents. Come see me. All right, I will. What's your name? Catherine, to strangers, and Kathy to friends. Thank you, Catherine. She smiled. Kathy's just fine. It didn't matter that I'd already wrapped all the presents I needed to. I unwrapped them and went back anyway. After that, gift-giving between the two of us became a sacred affair. I could never match her wrapping expertise, but I got better at the gift-giving part. The best one of all was our house. With the help of some friends, I had wrapped the entire place, from foundation to rooftop, in sparkling gold paper. It didn't look perfect, but Kathy loved it anyway. Word got around, and a photograph of us outside the wrapped house was featured in the local paper. The photo album was an homage to our gift-giving, each page chronicling a different wrapped present in a different year. Kathy could only look through a few before she slammed it shut. Oh, David, why do I do this to myself? She muttered, stuffing the album back in the box. This part I will never stop blaming myself for. I was lost in thought, reminiscing over all the gifts we'd given each other over the years, and I didn't notice Kathy was heading back down the ladder until I heard a shout of surprise. I rushed towards her, but it was too late, and she hit the ground with a resounding thud. I cried in horror, floundering helplessly as she breathed in short, winded breaths. I noticed a little blood gathering in her white hair and stared, paralyzed with fear. Kathy's brow furrowed, breath slowing a little, and I noticed with a jolt she was staring right back at me. I can't be sure what she was seeing. Maybe just a shifting of light or a shadow oddly placed, but it seemed to calm her. She took a deep breath, pulled her cell phone from her pocket, and called 911. After the paramedics came and took her from me, I flitted about the house feeling lost and directionless. Ade stopped by on occasion, picking up some of Kathy's favorite sweaters and knit socks, but she never lingered. She'd shiver, moving anxiously through the house, and then she was gone again. January and then February faded away, and on a cool morning in early March, Ade came to the house with a woman who had keen eyes and a briefcase full of papers. It just doesn't make sense to hold on to it anymore, Ade said, running her hands through her hair like I used to do for her when she was upset. My mom can't be on her own in her condition, and with no signs of things getting better, it just... Ade looked like she might cry, and the woman put her hand over Ade's. I'm sorry, Ade said. I just know how much my parents love this place. But after Dad and now Mom, it's the place of death. The woman nodded as if she understood. Don't worry, I'll take care of everything. The house was listed quickly and quietly, and I felt a dark anger grow inside me. I couldn't blame Ade for this decision. Her connection to the house wasn't the same, but this was Kathy and I's forever home, my gift to her, and it was my job to protect it while she was gone. I had failed her so many times. I could not do it again. The woman, who was a realtor by the name of Liz Connors, and I fell into a twisted routine. She'd host open houses and showings, and I did my best to ensure that those who came in never came back. During the first showing, a couple admired the original windows, and I flung them all open. They shrieked as a gust of cool air hit them and stumbled back, fleeing the house while Liz stared at the windows with her mouth agape. The next day, a young family mentioned their appreciation of the spacious rooms for their rambunctious twin girls, and I pulled on the twins' pigtails, sending them into wailing fits. I won't say I didn't feel a little guilty after driving children to tears, but when you've been outside of a physical body for so long, you begin to feel a strange sort of disconnect from people. Empathy becomes harder to find. Not with Kathy, though. Never with Kathy. I worried over her every day. How was she healing? Was she happy? I pictured her in an uncomfortable hospital bed, or tucked into the spare bedroom at Ade's house, and felt my limitations, my inability to cross the threshold of the house, more painfully than ever. I took it out on everyone else. I expected Liz Connors to quit. I tried things with her, too, slamming doors shut after she walked through, flinging her purse across the room, but it just seemed only to goad her more. Still no takers? Ade asked, walking in during an empty open house. This place is haunted, you know? Liz said, accusatory, like Ade had kept something from her, which I suppose she had. Ade sighed, worrying her lip. There's gotta be someone in this town that doesn't believe in all that. Liz snorted. I didn't. Then I came here. Still, eventually Liz found someone. A rich kid who had money from who knows where. Now, when I tell you this place has character, Liz said, leading him through the house. I mean, you've never seen a place like it. Really? The guy said skeptically. I flung a kitchen cabinet open as he walked by, almost hitting him in the face. He turned to Liz, eyes wide. What did I tell you? Character. A couple of days later, Liz was wandering the house on her phone, talking excitedly to Ade. He wants it. I know. He's just sending a home inspector here before he signs. Yes, everything's in excellent condition. You've got nothing to worry about. I hadn't considered the home inspection, thinking Kathy would be better before there was a chance for it to get to this point. And I knew with a sinking feeling that, in order to displease the inspector, I would have to do some damage to our house. Forgive me, Kathy. Minor, I promise. The home inspector arrived with the rich kid, and they made idle chit-chat as he inspected the place. The realtor trailed anxiously behind, eyeing the house suspiciously as if waiting for it to betray her. Patience. Liz. Kathy and I never went into the basement. It was ancient and musty and unneeded, so there was nothing much down there, apart from the water heater. The home inspector opened the basement door, flicked on the light, and sucked in a sharp breath. Oh dear. What? Liz cried, hurrying over. What's wrong? Liz stood beside the home inspector and the rich kid, and they all stared down at the ankle-deep water that covered the basement. Water heaters were surprisingly easy to burst. Somehow, someway, this did not deter the rich kid. Dear Ade replaced the water heater, and because the inspection was naturally never finished, it was rescheduled for the following week. Clearly, I would have to be more straightforward. I knew I was causing Ade plenty of trouble. She was already dealing with the weight of a sick mother and a father who had withered away until nearly invisible and then stayed that way after he passed. But I also knew that she didn't need to sell this place. She and her husband, Russ, made enough money to last their lifetimes. She was acting on a feeling she didn't understand, and I had to make her understand. When the home inspector came with the rich kid and Liz for the second time, they could not get the lights to work. I just don't understand it, Liz said, looking on the verge of a nervous breakdown. I was here just yesterday and the lights were working fine. Well, let's check the breakers, the inspector said, and they headed towards the garage. I followed eagerly. The inspector opened the door to the garage and frowned when he saw a small light coming from the corner of the room. "Ah, man. What now?" the rich kid said, looking at the light nervously. The inspector ignored him and walked towards it, the rich kid following behind. Liz stood in the doorway wringing her hands. On the floor was a lamp, unplugged but emitting light anyway, with a photo beside it. The rich kid picked it up, staring. "You know these people?" he asked Liz. Liz hurried over, squinting before her eyes widened in recognition. I'd chosen the news clip photo of Kathy and me outside our gift-wrapped house. "Ah, yes, the owners." The rich kid frowned. The inspector craned his neck, brow raised. "What's that on the back?" It was a spur-of-the-moment touch. 2 words that took a great deal of effort to write. Our house. The rich kid did not end up buying. Not only was the electricity shot through, a fortune to fix, but there was also something that felt deeply wrong about buying a place from owners who did not want you there. Liz quit the next day. I waited for Ade. I knew she'd come eventually, and a week later, she did. She walked into the dark house nervously. I watched her as she leaned against the kitchen island, working up the courage to say something. Is it you, Dad?" I reached out and brushed my hand through her hair. It swayed gently, and she gasped, eyes watering, before I wrapped my arms around her. She stood there and cried for some time. I held her tight and wondered if she could feel it, or if she just felt comfort and couldn't understand how. Eventually, she stepped away, her face twisted in a melancholy smile. "Okay, Dad. Okay." I was alone in the house for a long time. I kept it dusted, free of bugs and mold, but otherwise I floated listless and waiting. Sometimes Ade would come by and talk. She said she felt silly doing it, but I think it was therapeutic for her, too. She told me about Kathy, how her concussion had altered her, made her spacey and weak, how she asked for me. "I'm waiting, I promised, I'll always be waiting." One day, years after that promise, Kathy fell asleep for the last time. Beings like me never sleep. Not really. But when you're alone for so long, time lapses in days rather than seconds. One of those days, time slowed again, and I knew Kathy was home. To anyone walking by, the house would look empty. It wasn't, of course. We would always be here,